Hello to everyone listening from around the world. Today's account comes from Walter Briggs, 68, who shared what happened after 10 years of showing up for a family that never once drove to his house, and the birthday dinner that finally made him stop. This account has been dramatized to protect privacy. AI narration is used throughout. The experience it describes is real. Nobody came. My name is Walter Briggs. I am 69 years old as I tell you this, which means I was 68 when it happened, which means I had been a widower for 10 years and a reliable, present, consistently overlooked member of my family for every one of those 10 years. And on a Saturday evening in March, I cooked a full dinner, set my dining room table in the Broad Ripple neighborhood of Indianapolis for 7 people, and waited 4 hours. Nobody came. But let me tell you about the 10 years first, because the birthday dinner does not land right without the 10 years behind it. My wife Carol died on a Tuesday in April. She was 58 years old. Pancreatic cancer, the fast kind, the kind that announces itself when it is already finished with its planning, and has moved directly to execution. We had 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, which is either a mercy or a cruelty depending on the day you ask me, and I have had days that were both. Carol was the social center of our family. She remembered birthdays without consulting a phone. She knew what her grandchildren were studying in school, and what they were afraid of, and what they wanted to be when they grew up, and she updated this information regularly because she asked. She remembered what her brother Dennis's wife Karen had said at Thanksgiving 4 years earlier about wanting to learn to make pie crust, and she found a class and enrolled them both and drove Karen to it. She was the kind of person who makes everyone around her feel attended to, and the thing nobody told me about losing her, the thing I had to discover on my own, slowly, over months, was that everyone had been relying on her to do that work, and when she was gone, nobody was going to pick it up. Nobody picked it up. What they did instead was allow me to substitute for her, imperfectly and without acknowledgement, for 10 years. The first Christmas after Carol died, I drove 40 minutes to my daughter Patrice's house in Fishers with a ham I had cooked from a recipe Carol had used for 20 years, a bottle of wine I had picked out carefully because I knew what Dennis liked, and a set of presents I had wrapped myself for the first time in my adult life, because Carol had always done the wrapping. Nobody thanked me for the ham. Nobody noticed the wine. The presents were opened, and the paper was put in a bag, and the conversation moved on. I drove home at 9 p.m. The following Easter, I cooked again and drove again. Mother's Day, I drove to Patrice's house with flowers and watched my son-in-law Greg accept them on Patrice's behalf, because she was on the phone. Father's Day, nobody called until 7 in the evening, and when Patrice called, she sounded like someone checking an item off a list. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, graduations, first communions, school plays. I went to all of them. Not once in 10 years did anyone drive to my house in Broad Ripple. Not once did anyone sit at my table. Not once did anyone call first. I want to be fair about this, because fairness matters to me and because I have had a year to think about it clearly. Some of the non-calling was grief. In the early years, grief is disorienting and selfish in ways that people do not intend and do not fully recognize, and I gave my family credit for that for longer than was probably warranted. Some of it was the assumption that I was fine. I am a man who presents as fine even when I am not, which is either a strength or a coping mechanism and probably both. But after a while the non-calling stopped being grief and started being habit. And habits, left unaddressed, become expectations. And what my family had developed over 10 years was the quiet expectation that Walter would show up, and Walter would bring food, and Walter would ask how everyone was doing, and Walter would drive home alone, and Walter would be there again next time. Walter was reliable that way. My 68th birthday was on a Saturday in March. I decided, that year, to try something different. I called Patrice in January and told her I was planning a birthday dinner, not asking her to organize it, telling her I was organizing it and inviting her and Greg and their 2 children, and Dennis and Karen. 7 people. I had the menu planned. I had the date clear. I confirmed with everyone individually, Patrice on a Tuesday, Dennis on a Thursday, Greg by text because that is how Greg communicates. All 3 said yes. I bought the groceries on Friday morning. I spent Friday afternoon and Saturday morning cooking. A roast, roasted vegetables, Carol's potato recipe, a cake I had made from scratch using a method I had found on the internet and practiced twice in the preceding weeks. I set the table properly, with the good china and the cloth napkins Carol had kept in the bottom drawer of the sideboard, the ones she reserved for occasions. I set it for 7. I lit candles at 5:30, which was 30 minutes before the time I had given everyone. 6 o'clock came and went. 6:30. 7. At 7:15 I called Patrice. The call went to voicemail. I left a message that I am proud of in retrospect. Calm, no accusation. Just, hey, are you on your way? 7:30. 8. At 8:30 I called Dennis. He answered on the third ring with the voice of a man who is sitting comfortably at home watching television and has not recently thought about anything that might require him to be elsewhere. Walter, he said. What's up? What's up? I thought. What's up? The birthday dinner, I said. I had it down for tonight. A pause. The pause of a man who does not remember and is now calculating what to do with that fact. Oh, he said. Yeah, we had. Karen's thing ran long and we figured we'd catch you next time. Karen's thing? I said. Her book club. He said. It went late. I looked at the table. The good china, the cloth napkins, the candles that had been burning for 3 hours, 7 place settings. Not one of them disturbed. Okay, I told Dennis. Thanks for letting me know. I hung up. I sat at the table alone and ate a plate of the food I had made. And it was good food, and it deserved better than the evening it was served in. I ate slowly. When I finished, I blew out the candles, covered the dishes, and sat in the dark dining room for a while. This is the last time, I thought. Not angry, not dramatic, just clear, in the way that things become clear when you have finally let yourself see them whole. This is the last time I set this table. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these accounts had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. The following Monday morning, I called a real estate agent named Linda who worked at a firm on College Avenue in Broad Ripple. I had done enough research over the weekend to know what the house was likely worth. It was a good house in a good neighborhood. A 3-bedroom Craftsman I had owned for 22 years and had maintained carefully because Carol had loved it and then because it was mine. Linda came Tuesday morning, walked through the rooms, and gave me a number. That's the number I want, I told her. It might take 2 or 3 months in this market, she said. If it takes longer than 30 days, I told her, I'll reduce the price until it moves. She looked at me. Are you sure about this? She asked. I have been sure about very few things in my life. I told her. I am sure about this. I did not tell Dennis. I did not post anything on social media. I have no social media to speak of, which is either a personal failing or an advantage, and in this case was clearly an advantage. I packed what I wanted. I donated what I did not. Carol's jewelry, a pearl necklace, her engagement ring, 2 sets of earrings she wore regularly. I wrapped carefully in tissue paper and put in a small wooden box that I packed with my own things. Because they were not furniture and they were not a house and they were hers and therefore mine and not available for distribution. I closed every bank account at that branch and opened new accounts at a different institution. I did not forward my mail. I left no forwarding address. On April 14th, exactly 10 years and 3 days after Carol died, I loaded the last boxes into the back of my truck and I drove out of the Broad Ripple neighborhood of Indianapolis for the last time. And I did not look back, not because I was angry, but because there was nothing behind me that required a second look. I had a destination. I had a plan. I had Carol's jewelry box on the passenger seat and 1,100 miles of road ahead of me. That was enough. Bend, Oregon is not a place most people in Indianapolis think about much. It is in the high desert of central Oregon, east of the Cascade Mountains, at an elevation of 3,600 feet. The winters are cold and dry and bright rather than the gray, wet cold of Indiana. The Deschutes River runs through the city. The mountains are visible on clear days from most parts of town. The Three Sisters, Broken Top, Mount Bachelor, and clear days in Bend are the rule rather than the exception. I had driven through Bend once, in 2009, on a road trip Carol and I had taken to celebrate our 30th anniversary. Carol had looked out the car window at the mountains and the river and the high desert light and said, "If I were starting over somewhere, it would be here." She had not been starting over. She had been passing through. But I had filed the remark the way I file things that matter, and 10 years later, sitting at a dining room table with 7 place settings and no guests, I had thought about it. I arrived in Bend on a Thursday afternoon in April, in a furnished rental apartment on Franklin Avenue near Drake Park, and I sat on the small balcony with a cup of coffee and looked at the mountains and thought, hello, just that. Hello. I did not know a single person in Bend, Oregon. I was 68 years old, recently retired from 28 years as a civil engineer with the city of Indianapolis, financially stable due to a combination of a pension, savings I had managed carefully, and the proceeds from the house sale. I had no obligations to anyone within 1,100 miles. It was, I will tell you honestly, the most frightening and the most relieving morning of my life, and those two things existed simultaneously without contradiction. The first 3 months were quiet, in ways I had not anticipated. Not lonely exactly. I have always been comfortable with my own company, which is either a gift or a warning sign, and in this case it was a gift. I walked the river trail in the mornings. I cooked real food for myself, because I like cooking and had always done it for other people, and discovered that cooking for yourself without an audience has its own quiet pleasure. I read. I slept well for the first time in years. In July, I walked past a building on Hawthorne Avenue that had a sign in the window, Bend Woodworking Co-op, members welcome. I had done woodworking as a hobby for 15 years. Furniture, mostly, small pieces, the kind of work that requires patience and precision and rewards both. I had stopped during the years after Carol died, partly because I had been too busy showing up for other people, and partly because the workshop in the Broad Ripple house had felt too quiet without her moving around in the rooms beyond it. I walked in. The co-op had 12 members. They ranged in age from 31 to 74. They had a shared workshop space, shared equipment, a monthly meeting where people showed what they were working on and helped each other solve problems, and the quality of conversation that happens naturally when people are doing something with their hands and are not performing. I paid the monthly fee. I started coming on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Within 6 weeks, I had been invited to a member's birthday dinner at a restaurant on Bond Street, attended a weekend trip to a river campsite organized by 3 co-op members and their families, and been given the unofficial title of the guy who brings coffee. Because I had started arriving early with a thermos, nobody had assigned me the role. I had chosen it, freely, because I wanted to. That's the difference, I thought, one Tuesday morning in August, pouring coffee for a 34-year-old furniture maker named Tom, who had just finished his first dovetail joint, and was unreasonably proud of it. Choosing it because you want to. In September, I set up a table at the Bend Farmers Market on NW Hawthorne Avenue on Saturday mornings and began selling small pieces, cutting boards, small tables, a set of stools I had made from reclaimed pine. I priced them honestly, not cheaply. The second Saturday, a woman appeared at my table and stood looking at a small side table I had finished in tung oil. Her name was Ruth. She was 62, recently retired, moved to Bend from Portland 2 years earlier for roughly the same reasons I had moved from Indianapolis. The specific combination of a life that needed more air in it and a place that looked like it could provide some. She had the quality of someone who had made a considered decision and was at peace with it. She looked at the table, then at me. "Did you make this?" she asked. "I did," I told her. She turned it over carefully, examined the joinery, set it back down. "Do you take commissions?" she asked. "I do now," I said. She laughed, a direct, unperformed laugh, and bought the table and left her number. She called 3 days later about the commission. She called again the week after that about something she had read that she thought I would find interesting. She showed up at the co-op workshop one Tuesday morning with her own thermos of coffee and said, "Tom told me you get here early. I'm an early person too." She was, as it turned out, a person who called first. I want to tell you how significant that sounds to a man who spent 10 years being the one who always called first. It does not sound like a small thing. It sounds like something you did not know you needed until you had it. Ruth became my first commission customer. Then my second genuine friend in Bend. Then, I should tell you this plainly and without performance, my first genuine companionship since Carol. Not a replacement for Carol. Nothing like Carol in the ways that matter. But a person who chose me freely, who showed up at my door without being asked, who called first every time. I did not know yet what would come of that. What I knew was that it felt nothing like setting a table and waiting. It felt like being met. If you have been listening to this and you are not subscribed yet, do it right now. Because what happens when my family finally tracks me down, and what Dennis says when he calls, and what he reveals without meaning to, is something you are going to want to hear. Subscribe. The call came in March, 11 months after I had left Indianapolis. 11 months of silence from my family, which I want to note was not entirely surprising. If you are only present in someone's life as a function, the disappearance of the function tends to be noticed rather than the disappearance of the person. Dennis called a cell phone number I had kept active for exactly this reason, not to be found, but to document the finding. Walter. His voice had an unfamiliar quality. Not grief, not urgency, something more like inconvenience. I've been trying to reach you for a month. Why haven't you called back? I should tell you that Dennis had my email address. He had not emailed. He had the cell number and had apparently tried it several times, which is the kind of effort that arrives 11 months late and expects to be credited. I've been busy, I told him. Busy, he repeated. Walter, we've been trying to find you. Patrice's husband, Greg, drove to your house, and some strangers answered the door. I moved, I said. We know you moved. Where did you move? Away, I said. A pause. What does that mean? He said. It means I live somewhere else now, I said. I'm fine, Dennis. I'm healthy. I'm settled. I'm enjoying myself. Why didn't you tell anyone? I thought about the good china, the cloth napkins, the candles that burned for 3 hours, 7 place settings, not one of them touched. I didn't think anyone would notice for a while, I told him. A longer pause. Walter, we need to talk about Carol's jewelry, he said. The pearl necklace and the engagement ring. Patrice has been asking about them. We assumed they were in the house when you sold it. There it is. I thought. Not. We were worried about you. Not. We are sorry we missed your birthday. Not. We have not called in a year and we know it, and we want to explain. The pearl necklace, the engagement ring, the jewelry is with me. I told him. Carol was my wife. Her jewelry is mine. Patrice thought it should be discussed as a family. Dennis, I said. He stopped. You called me, I said, after 11 months of silence, to ask about a necklace. The line was quiet. I want you to think about that, I said. Not for me. For yourself. Think about what that call says about what the last 11 months have been. Think about what it says about the 10 years before them. I let that sit for a moment. Carol wore that necklace to our wedding. She wore it to every significant occasion of our life together. It is on my dresser right now in the apartment where I live, and I look at it every morning. It is not a family asset. It is a memory of a woman I loved for 32 years. And it came with me because it was mine to take. Dennis did not say anything. If you want to talk, I said, call me about something that matters. I'll answer. I ended the call. I put the phone down on the workbench. I picked up the sandpaper and went back to the piece I'd been working on. Some things do not require a raised voice. They only require the other person to hear themselves clearly, perhaps for the first time, in the silence after you have stopped explaining yourself. Dennis heard himself. Patrice called 3 days later. I had been expecting it. When Dennis reports back to Patrice, Patrice acts. That had been the family dynamic for as long as I could remember, and apparently 11 months of my absence had not altered it. She called on a Wednesday evening. I was in the workshop, finishing a commission piece, a small writing desk in white oak for a woman named Sandra who lived in Tumalo, just outside Bend, and who had been patient about the timeline because she understood that good work takes the time it takes. I answered, Dad. Her voice had the quality of someone who has rehearsed an opening and is now delivering it. Where are you? Are you okay? We've been worried. I'm in Oregon. Oregon, she repeated. Bend, Oregon, I said. It's beautiful here. You'd like it. Dad, why didn't you tell anyone you were moving? We didn't know if you were. If I was what? I asked. A pause. We didn't know if something had happened, she said. Something did happen, I told her. I had a birthday dinner in March. I cooked for 7 people. Nobody came. Not you, not Greg, not your kids, not Dennis, not Karen. Nobody called to explain until 8:30 that evening, when Dennis told me Karen's book club had run late. I let that sit. That was when I understood something I had been slow to understand. Silence. Dad, we should have called. I know that. You should have come, I said. But that's not the point anymore. What is the point? I thought about how to answer that honestly. The point, I said, is that for 10 years I drove to every birthday and every holiday and every graduation. I cooked every dinner I brought to your house. I called first, every time. And in 10 years, not once did you drive to Broad Ripple to sit at my table. I let that land. I'm not angry, Patrice. I was sad for a long time. Now I'm just living somewhere else. She was quiet for a while. Where in Oregon? She asked. Bend, I said. Central Oregon. East of the Cascades. Can I come visit? I thought about that. Yes, I said. You can, but you'd have to drive to me. She came in May. She flew into Portland and rented a car and drove the 3 hours over the mountains to Bend on a Friday afternoon. Arriving at my apartment on Franklin Avenue at 5:30 p.m., with a bottle of wine and the slightly overwhelmed expression of someone seeing her father's new life for the first time, and not having known what to expect. She had not told me she was bringing anyone. She came alone, without Greg, without the kids. Just her, a rental car, and the bottle of wine. You look good, she said, standing in my doorway. I feel good, I told her. I showed her the apartment. Simple, well organized, the small pieces of furniture I had made visible on the shelves and the side tables. I showed her the workshop I had rented on Industrial Way, a small space where I had moved from the co-op when the commissions started coming regularly enough to justify it. I showed her the farmer's market table in a photograph Tom had taken one Saturday morning, the mountains visible in the background, my table full of pieces in the foreground. She was quiet through most of it, the quiet of someone absorbing something they had not fully imagined. We had dinner at a restaurant on Bond Street that evening. Ruth joined us. I had told Ruth about Patrice's visit, and she had offered to give us space. And I had said, no, come, it will be good. Ruth and Patrice talked for 2 hours. At one point, Patrice looked at me across the table with an expression I had not seen on her face before, something between recognition and something harder to name. You're happy, she said. Yes, I told her. I didn't know you were unhappy before. I wasn't unhappy, I said. I was invisible. Those are different. On her last evening, Saturday, we sat on the balcony of my apartment after dinner. The mountains were turning pink in the late light. The air had the high desert quality that still feels remarkable to me every time. Dry and clean and thin in a way you notice with every breath. I'm sorry about the birthday, Patrice said. I know, I told her. I don't mean just that one, she said. I mean, I think I let a lot of years go by where I assumed you were fine and I didn't check. I looked at the mountains. Your mother used to check. I said. She checked on everyone. When she was gone, nobody picked it up. I think everyone assumed someone else was doing it. I turned to look at Patrice. Including me. I assumed if I kept showing up, eventually someone would show up for me. That was my mistake too. What do I do with that? She asked. You call first, I told her. Not because I need you to, because that's how relationships work. Someone calls first. She nodded. Can I come back? She asked. In the fall, maybe. Bring the kids. I'd like that, I told her. Call first. She laughed. The first real laugh of the weekend, the kind that breaks something loose. I'll call first, she said. If you have made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people listen without ever doing it. It costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely. Now, the last thing I want to say. Here is what I have learned in 69 years, and the last year of it most clearly. Presence is a gift, not just the presence of showing up, the presence of being present in return, of calling first, of driving to someone else's house for once, of remembering that the people who always show up are not showing up because they have nothing better to do. They are showing up because they love you, and love is a renewable resource, but it is not infinite, and it does not renew itself automatically when nobody is tending to it. For 10 years I tended a relationship with my family that they had largely stopped maintaining. I did not do this because I was a fool, though I was slow. I did it because I loved them, and because Carol would have done it, and because the alternative, stopping, felt at the time like loss rather than liberation. What I did not understand, until a Saturday night in March with 7 place settings and no guests, was that I had already lost something. Not my family. You can lose the active version of a relationship and still recover it, if both people choose to. What I had lost was 10 years of the version of myself that deserved to be shown up for. I got that version back in Bend. The pearl necklace is on my dresser in the apartment on Franklin Avenue. I look at it sometimes in the mornings when I am getting dressed. Carol wore it to our wedding and to every significant occasion after that. And it carries her in the way that small objects carry people. Not completely, not painlessly, but truly. I will decide what to do with it when I am ready. Not when Patrice asks, not when Dennis implies, not when the family decides it should be distributed according to someone else's timeline. When I am ready. That is the other thing I have learned. The timeline is mine. The decisions are mine. The address is mine. And it is not available to people who only started wondering where I lived when they wanted something I might have left behind. Dennis has not called again. I am not angry about this. I am not waiting for it either. If he calls, I will answer. If he does not, I will walk the river trail in the morning and go to the workshop on Tuesday and Thursday, and take my table to the farmer's market on Saturday, and have dinner with Ruth on Friday evenings, and be present, genuinely present, in a life I built on purpose. The thing I want you to take from this story, the thing beneath the dinner that nobody came to, and the house that sold in 30 days in the 1,100 miles of road, is simpler than revenge and more durable than any confrontation I could have had. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to stop driving to the people who never drive to you. You are allowed to stop calling first to the people who never call. You are allowed to stop setting the table for the people who have decided your table is not worth sitting at. This is not coldness. It is not cruelty. It is the recognition that your time and your presence and your effort are not obligations you owe to people simply because they share your last name. They are gifts. And gifts given freely are beautiful. And gifts demanded by people who have stopped noticing them are something else entirely. When you stop, 2 things will happen. Some people will not notice, which will tell you something true about what you were to them. And some people, like Patrice, flying into Portland with a bottle of wine and 3 hours of mountain road ahead of her, will drive to you. Those are the people worth setting the table for. Set it for them. Leave the others to figure out what happened to the address. The mountains are still pink at this time of evening. The river is 2 blocks away. Ruth is coming for dinner on Friday. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.